Is moving to Belize on your wish list? If it's not, stay tuned to this interview because I'm about to introduce you to someone who I think will make sure that this destination is one that you are definitely considering if cost of living and well-being is something that matters to you. Ashley, remind me, how long have you been living in Belize?
4 years.
4 years. Wow. Then
Yeah, four
time has
years.
flown since we
I
spoke
know.
2 years ago, and I'll put a
Been a
link to the
while.
video up the top so people can check that out. But remind us, why did you choose Belize? What was it about Belize that appealed to you?
It's the only English-speaking country in the Central Americas. Cost of living was relatively cheap at the time. And there's the tax financial side of things as well. Taxes are a lot better here than the UK. So I think, we did do a long checklist, and out of all the countries that we did our list for, Belize came up top, so we decided to do the 6 months trial. I was 7 months pregnant at the time. And I figured, what better time to do maternity than a place like this? And my daughter was due in December at the time. So I was like, yeah, winter in the UK, newborn, no thank you. So it aligned, and it worked. So we did just that.
Nice. And in terms of lifestyle, as a family, how would you describe the lifestyle in Belize? And I'm imagining it possibly varies from region to region or city to city, but overall, generally, how would you describe the Belizean lifestyle?
I think Belizean lifestyle, like you said, Belize, for such a small country, it's very diverse, not just landscape wise, from being out in the Keys with islands, the island life and the water, to being deep in the jungle, in the Cayo district, or being immersed in the Garifuna culture in the south, or being up north where we are, where there's so much Mexican influence. We have the water, but we're out in the bush at the moment, but I'm only 15 minutes away from the ocean. So there's a lot of variety in life. And for us, no 2 days are the same, even though we're out on our little corner here. But for family life, I found it to be wonderful for kids. I mean, I've got two small ones under 10. Like I said earlier, we had our daughter here, and it's a family-centered culture here, and it's really nice for the kids. It's very free, and people are just friendly, and we go to the playgrounds, and kids are always making friends, as they normally do anywhere in the world anyway. It's generally a family-friendly, community center area. And it's like that for the most part all over the country.
Right. Yeah. And so tell me more about the area that you're in. What's the name? How would you describe it geographically in terms of like the landscape, etc.? And what's your community like? Is it mainly expats or is it mixed? Tell us more.
So where we are is Corozal. Corozal is in north of the country. It's not the flashiest, and it doesn't come up for the most part in a lot of the expat community searches. It's not, I guess, like the Party Islands, or it does have a relatively large expat community. We have a few friends that are expats, but mostly we've managed to integrate into the local community. Partially, I think, because we've got kids, so you make a lot of friends that way through your kids. Funny enough, it's a very quiet town. It's right on the bay. We are about 15-20 minutes from the Mexican border. So a lot of people settle here. Mainly when it comes to expats, there are a large number of retirees.
Okay.
The reason why they do that for the most part is because of ease of access to Mexico. If there were to be any medical issues, any emergencies needed, because Belize doesn't have the greatest healthcare system for more of chronic healthcare issues, or a lot of the more, high-tech needed type of healthcare issues. And that's what Mexico comes into play. The fact that it's so close, the cost is a lot cheaper, the quality is great. So a lot of expats in their older years tend to find settling here better for them because of the ease of access to Mexico. The fact that they don't have to be in Mexico, but they can access it. A lot of the locals would go to give birth in Mexico. again, just in case there were some complications that they wouldn't feel comfortable being able to deal with here. So the ease to Mexico, I guess, is one of the main reasons a lot of expats come here. And a lot of our local friends who have lived in other areas in the country or grew up in other parts of the country, like Belize City, which gets quite a bit of a rough rep, which in parts makes sense because it's a very poor area. There's parts of Belize City that is quite poor. A lot of families moved from those areas to come to Corozal because they've got small kids now. And this is a community where it's a lot more family centered and there's a lot of older community. So there is no party scene. There aren't a lot of young expats that move here for just that. Landscape wise, you have a mixture in this district, the Corozal district in general, of a lot of bushland. We've got the bay as well. So you've got coastal living, you've got the Caribbean Sea right here. You've got the bush on the other side. And I guess for me, it's the best of both worlds.
And what does it feel like in terms of safety? Because I think as a family, as a mother with 3 young kids, safety is a massive issue for me. So how does your area, how would you describe the safety there?
I think it's been, very safe, like a lot safer than London, to be fair. Like, raising kids in London, I find to be a lot more uneasy, sorry, I should say, in London. And I guess a lot of other parts in the world. I feel a lot safer here. I feel a lot safer here, not just for my kids, but I think, and I've said this probably before in the last interview, as a Black woman, this is the safest, most welcoming country that I've come across. And I've traveled all over the world, and I've lived in, your Europes and Asias and Africa, East Africa. I spent, a couple of years in East Africa, and I feel safer as a Black woman here, which is an odd thing to say, I guess, in some way. But the welcome that I've received here, it's honestly second to none. Like, I'm not saying that this country doesn't have crime and there aren't, various criminal activities that take place, but the district that we're in, and Corozal in general, it's just really quiet. Like, barely anything happens here. Yes, there's crime. It's not that there's no crime. But in terms of safety, we've not felt it at all, to be honest.
Awesome.
We've got one of our closer friends, for example, she is looking after her granddaughter, and her daughter bikes to the school by herself. Again, it's not too far. They live in town and the school is biking distance, but the 10-year-old goes off to school by herself and comes back on her own. Could you do that for your 10-year-old in London?
Maybe not.
So
maybe not. And you mentioned a really interesting topic, which is schooling. So your kids are unschooled or homeschooled. I don't know which definition you use. But how would you describe the options for families who are looking for schooling or traditional schooling options for their children? And what is it like as a non-traditional family? Are there other homeschoolers, unschoolers? How have you gone about making community in that aspect?
Talking about the traditional schooling first, there's quite a lot of schools around, and a lot of them are mostly faith-based schools, which Christianity is obviously a big deal in this side of the world, but a lot of other communities that aren't necessarily Christianity centered still send their children to these schools. And we actually tried sending our older one now to preschool. The schooling is perfectly fine. It's okay. It just didn't work for us and our personal requirements and standards that we have. But like I said, our friend who is from the US, looking after her granddaughter, she goes to school here, and so do a lot of other kids. The schools are perfectly fine, to be honest. It just didn't, like I said, work for us. As far as our approach goes, it's mainly unschooling, life schooling, however you want to approach it. It's learner-led. Community-wise, because there are not that many expat families up north, we don't have that big of a unschooling, homeschooling community. But there is a homeschooling association of Belize, and they are based in Belmopan, which is the capital further south. So there are different meetups throughout the year, and yeah, just different activities for us to all go to. But as far as I guess kids socialization and all of that goes, between the karate that they both do on the weekends and the football association that they also do as well, yeah, playground and all the other friends, birthdays and various other things that we all take part in. It's yeah, yeah, that's the schooling.
It sounds amazing. It sounds absolutely amazing. I can understand why people are tempted. And with the idea of being somewhere that fantastic and the cost of living potentially being lower, I can't wait to talk to you about that aspect, because I think, yeah, being able to afford to live really well is something that's spectacularly important. So let's dive into that in our next chat.